suddenly we have ice on the mountain. Very interesting to have ice on the mountain appearing on this Lunar New Year, the year of the fire horse. And so we have fire and ice. Very interesting. The mountain, the Sonoma Mountain Mandala, perhaps, is cooling the fire just a bit. So, on this Lunar New Year, in the year of the fire horse, I want to begin with a story. I want to share a story. So this is vignette number 1, opening vignette. This afternoon's talk might end up being a series of vignettes, and we'll see how I do in connecting them together. Or better yet, how you will connect them together. How your heart, your mind, your body might connect these words together. The story I'd like to share is a story of wildfire. The story I want to begin with is the story of a horse named Wildfire. It's a story that is a memory of mine, and a fairly vivid memory of mine from my childhood. But this story, is one of those stories that gets told within a family over and over and over again. Even to this day, and in fact, even to this morning when I was receiving messages from my mom about this story. So, hard to say where the vividness of my childhood memory and just my memory of the stories and what happens with stories as they're told and retold, where that ends and begins. I was 7 years old, roughly. And we were down in Tennessee visiting family. My mom's side of the family down there in Tennessee, and we were visiting my Aunt Bonnie and cousin Seth. And they had a nice homestead on the side of the wooded hills. And on this homestead, they had horses, a few horses. And at least a few big open fields and fenced. And this 7-year-old little Christopher, little Fugan, saw this young horse. And I was drawn to it, and I wanted to ride this horse. I had never ridden a horse before. But I wanted to ride this horse. My Aunt Bonnie then informed me and my mom and my dad that this young horse went by the name Wildfire. So we were about to set a 7-year-old little boy atop a young horse named Wildfire. This might be foreshadowing. Even the name made my mom nervous. Aunt Bonnie thought about it for a bit, and she said, I think this will be fine, and I'll be close by. So I sat atop the horse and started just at a gentle walk. My Aunt Bonnie was off to the side at first, touching the horse, touching the wildfire, and then just holding the reins. All was going well, and so then she dropped that and started to fade away by just a few steps. No one knew exactly what made wildfire run. We think it may have been that young wildfire saw his mother in the adjacent field on the far side of that field. And these two fields separated by a fence. But off shot wildfire at a full gallop with little 7-year-old me atop wildfire. And so I rode. And I remember yes, some surprise and some shock, but I don't remember fear. And I remember just being with wildfire. And I remember the wind in my face. And then I remember seeing the fence separating the two fields quickly approaching with wildfire still at full speed. And my mom, even this morning in retelling the story, was saying, like, seeing me on top of wildfire with that fence approaching, everyone there being almost certain that this horse was about to jump this fence with me on top, said my dad had to hold her because she was about to faint. Still at full speed with the fence quickly approaching, still just with wildfire. I remember leaning forward just a bit and gently kind of just holding on to wildfire's neck and mane and being with the rhythm of that full speed horse, full speed wildfire. This might be where my tendency, I'm realizing right now, tendency of my forward lean, even with incense, comes. Wildfire did not jump the fence. Instead, came to a sudden full stop halt directly at the fence, and then proceeded to rear up onto its hind legs with me still holding on. And then as wildfire came down to all four legs again, and as my Aunt Bonnie came running across the field trying to catch up and quickly approaching with my mom and my dad in tail, they're all arriving. And wildfire knelt on the ground. And I slid off the saddle. And I reached over and I touched Wildfire's neck, and I think touched his face. And then I just gently stepped back. And in that moment then, my mom swept me up into her arms and said, "Chris, are you okay? Are you okay?" And I said, yes. And then my dad said, "Were you scared?" And I said, no. And then my Aunt Bonnie said, Chris, do you want to ride wildfire again? And I said, no. And then I added, not yet. Not yet. But now, today, here, in this Lunar New Year, year of the fire horse, and now having become a resident here at Genjoji, and now right now in the midst of Sesshin, it's time to mount up. It's time to ride wildfire, to ride the fire horse. And so we saddle up together. We are saddled up together. But how we ride is one of the most essential matters. I've enjoyed for several months now seeing in all of media, especially social media, all the articles and posts you may have also seen about this year of the fire horse. And I ended up kind of doing a bit of a deep dive into that. Very interesting. And what I've learned is that as great and fascinating and insightful and fitting as many of those articles and posts are, many of them also may be only partial truths at best, and some, maybe even many of them, I think maybe have been misleading, or at least missing something. And so I wanted to share a very insightful commentary on the year of the fire horse from a person that I really appreciate, a Qigong teacher named Mimi Kuo Deemer, because it takes us into our practice. It takes us in this perspective, takes us into our practice and into our theme of Ango and the theme we've begun with this Sesshin. She writes, contrary to some predictions I've read that the fire horse year brings some serious horsepower of galloping energy, big changes and big emotions, dynamic change, rapid change. Big energy, big change, big emotions. She says it's just as possible that this coming horse year could reflect a more balanced expression. And she says horses themselves offer a useful starting point. Horses actually rarely gallop unless they're startled or forced. And in ancient China, the horses symbolized naturalness and inner freedom rather than constant exertion. This is our practice. Horses embody a natural confidence, a natural trust, a confident trust, and alignment that feels relaxed and alive. And this is our practice. And this mirrors the deeper meaning of a fire. Fire is not inherently about intensity or thrill seeking. This type of fire signals imbalance. I think so many of us have heard Roshi say, too much fire, not good. In Chinese five-element theory, or 5-phase model. Healthy fire expresses connection, maturity, and calm. This is our practice. With balanced fire, we open to spacious ease and a quiet brightness in the spirit. Spacious ease and a quiet brightness in the spirit. This is our practice, or what's revealed and expressed, enacted in our practice. Seen through this lens, the fire horse has the potential for steady momentum rather than sudden chaos. Steady momentum, constancy. This is our practice, continuous practice. So when put through this more classical framework and its deeper meaning, it favors clarity without haste, movement with rest built in, and care that supports connection. This is our practice. She does caution. Problems arise when fire is over-stimulated or under-stimulated, or the horse becomes startled or excessively reined in. Then we may find ourselves depleted or expending a great deal of energy without getting very far. Remember, fire in balance is calm, and a steady horse knows when to stop, flick off a few flies, munch on grass, and carry on with grounded grace. This is our practice. Through our practice, when we and live them, and align with them, and align with life as it is each moment, meeting each situation fully, and something happens. This self and other, tightly grasped, begins to soften, open, and the hard distinction, tightly held, dissolves. Then no separation, then non-separation. Some of us have heard Roshi say recently, then nothing above the saddle, nothing below the saddle, no saddle. Just connection and relating so fully given in full connection, fully merged such that there's no more merging. And this, in fact, also points to the theme of the Shinjin Mei, the poem, the teaching poem that's the source of our theme for Ango. And so we'll turn to that in just a moment. I'm remembering that a few people asked if I could reread a poem that I had shared Sunday night in opening words for Sesshin. And since we have some new folks joined now for this Sesshin here in the Zendo and some online, I think that would be good. So I'll offer it again. And it also helps to take us into our theme. I'd shared that on Sunday morning I discovered a poet that I had never heard of that was brand new to me. And I was quickly kind of captured. Her name's Jan Richardson. And so I found myself enthralled by this poem and invited into it. And then I found myself, without trying, kind of playing with the words and reworking it a little bit. And it turned into something especially for us. Her poems take the form of blessings and are collected into a book of blessings. The original poem is called Blessing the Threshold, and for us it has become Blessing the Threshold of Sesshin. Sesshin, gathering the mind, gathering the heart mind, to touch the heart mind. Gathering the heart mind. So here it is. This Sesshin has been waiting for you for a long time. While you have been making your way here, the blessing of this Sesshin has been gathering itself, making ready, biding its time in fullness, just sitting. And this Sesshin has been polishing the door, oiling the hinges, sweeping the steps, cleaning the floors, sounding the bells, lighting candles at the altars. This Sesshin has been setting the table as it hums a tune from an old song it knows, something about a spiraling road and bread and the grace of refuge. All this time, it has kept an eye on the horizon, watching, keeping vigil, hardly aware of how it was leaning itself in your direction. And now that you are here, this Sesshin can hardly believe its good fortune, and that you have finally arrived, that it can drop everything at last, to fling its arms wide to you, crying, "Welcome. Welcome, welcome." The Sesshin can hardly believe its good fortune that you have finally arrived, that it can drop everything at last, to fling its arms wide to you, opening the arms wide, like an embrace. Our theme for the second half of Ango and for this Sesshin: if you wish to move in the one way, do not dislike even the worlds of senses and ideas. Indeed, to embrace them fully is identical with true enlightenment. And one more time, another way: if you wish to move in the way of non-separation, do not dislike, do not reject, do not hold away the worlds of the senses, including the world of ideas or thoughts. Indeed, to fling our minds and hearts' arms wide open and embrace them fully is identical with true enlightenment. I think this verse of the whole poem, Shinjin-mei, sometimes translated as trust in mind, I think this verse in particular jumped out at me because it can be a bit of a correction, maybe, for serious Zen students. Because, for me, it's easy to misunderstand and mishear what our relationship to the senses or feelings or thoughts, it can be at its best. Because we hear a lot about not being caught by thinking. We hear a lot about non-thinking, before thinking mind. We're not being caught by any of our senses or emotions, and it can sometimes take the form of then, without realizing it, beginning to think of thoughts or senses or feelings as almost like the enemy, something to avoid. And this classic Zen teaching poem is saying, nah, not so. Indeed, to embrace those things is identical with true enlightenment. And now I'll have to explore what this embrace means and how it might differ from being caught by thinking, ideas, senses, feelings. So that verse will serve as kind of a touchstone. But for part of the rest of this talk this afternoon, and the talk that I'll offer on Thursday and then on Saturday, really want to draw upon the poem as a whole. And so let's take a little bit of it right now. And what I'd like to do, and what I have done, is to invite some other voices, because it's important other voices can be heard as well. Especially in a poem like this, it's good to hear it spoken through other voices. And so first I've invited Carol to begin, and we'll listen to Carol as she reads.
A great way is not difficult for those not attached to preferences. When neither love nor hate arises, all is clear and undisguised. Separate by the smallest amount, however, and you are as far from it as heaven is from earth.
The great way is not difficult for those not attached to preferences. The translation that we're using here is one of the few that draws out this aspect or distinction of what's at issue here is not necessarily the preferences themselves, but the attachment, the grasping, the holding to those preferences. This is something worth investigation and closely tending to. We also might get curious about this line, when neither love nor hate arises. I think on Saturday I'll end up talking a little bit about love. And it's important to see here that I think in my reading, it's safe to say that this poem, when it's using love here in this line, is talking about a kind of self-preoccupied, caught in the self-centered dream sort of love, attachment to love. Something we love, we're reaching out because we have to have it, grasping, gripping for it, a kind of love. On the other side of that, though, if we can see that clearly, is maybe great bodhisattva love, great compassion. Maybe we can explore that later. Please go ahead, Carol.
If you wish to know the truth, then hold to no opinions for or against anything. To set up what you like against what you dislike is the disease of the mind.
That first section had said the great way is not difficult for those not attached to preferences. Okay, good to know. A great way is not difficult. But not being attached to preferences? How do we do that? That could seem quite difficult. How to do that? And so then that next section that Carol just read walks right into that. Well, if you wish to know the truth of it, hold to no opinions for or against anything, neither pro nor con. And then it gives the diagnosis. Actually, the root cause, like the epidemiology, etiology, there we go, the etiology of these attachments. Well, setting up what we like against what we dislike, says the poems, the disease of the mind. Ooh. Uh-oh, that sounds strong. Better learn about this. Go ahead, Carol.
When the fundamental nature of things is not recognized, the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. The way is perfect, as vast space is perfect, where nothing is lacking and nothing is in excess.
Here we come to the origin of this disease of the mind. It begins for us when the fundamental nature of things is not recognized. That's when the mind's essential peace is disturbed to no avail. When the fundamental nature of things is not recognized. So our hearts might turn toward that fundamental nature. How to recognize this fundamental nature. And what keeps us? What keeps us from recognizing this fundamental nature? I wondered if Shanae, if you could continue for us.
Indeed, it is due to our grasping and rejecting that we do not know the true nature of things. Live neither in the entanglements of outer things, nor in ideas or feelings of emptiness. Be serene and at one with things, and erroneous views will disappear by themselves.
What makes it difficult for us to recognize the fundamental nature of things? This Zen teaching poem, a classic, says, what makes that hard to recognize is our grasping and rejecting. And so we can help ourselves and, even more importantly, help others by getting more curious and studying up close our own grasping and rejecting. When we do, what might appear is this capacity to be serene, to be more at one with things. And then all our errored thinking and all our disturbed perspectives of our fluttering mind, our erroneous views, disappear by themselves. Shanae.
When you try to stop activity to achieve quietude, your very effort fills you with activity. As long as you remain attached to one extreme or the other, you will never know oneness. Those who do not live in a single way cannot be free in either activity or quietude, in assertion or denial.
This was our theme for the first half, Shuso Hokan's theme. And I'm remembering his talk, cows of the mind. So we've had cows and now we have horses. But this section ends with the importance of freedom, being able to be free, to move in the way of freedom, no matter what the situation, whether it's activity or quietude. And go ahead, Shanae.
Deny the reality of things and you miss their reality. Assert the emptiness of things and you miss their reality. The more you talk and think about it, the further you wander from that truth. So cease attachment to talking and thinking. There is nothing you will not be able to know.
So cease attachment. A theme of this Shinjin Mei. I also think these last two lines are almost like a candy for those of us who are or can be attached to talking and thinking. Kind of karma candy. And if you have some of this attachment to talking and thinking, it's often because either you're wanting to know, have a passion to know, or think you know something, and so then the talking and thinking appears. Oh, because you want to know something, and this is saying, well, if you cease attachment to this, there's nothing you will not be able to know. That gets us to step in. Deny the reality of things and you miss their reality. Assert the emptiness of things and you miss their reality. Also, this seems to be part of the diagnosis of the trouble or disturbance, the wobbliness we feel in life or in ourselves or in the world. Something to do with missing reality, missing it. But I think it's also suggesting the way we then try to get and grasp reality is part of the very problem that continues to cause us to miss it. So this is our practice to explore this. Russ, continue for us, please.
To return to the root is to find the essence, but to pursue appearances or enlightenment is to miss the source. To awaken, even for a moment, is to go beyond appearance and emptiness.
Getting caught and holding to how things are or seem and taking that as reality or fullness of reality is to miss the source. Having an idea of awakening, an idea of enlightenment, and chasing that is to miss the source. Returning to the root of the root of the root is to find the essence, the source. This is our practice. Russ.
Changes that seem to occur in the empty world we make real only because of our ignorance. Do not seek for the truth, only cease to cherish opinions.
Only cease to cherish my opinions. This translation is helpful for me, and I appreciate it. Cease to cherish them. Opinions can appear, and very likely will still appear. Don't get caught in cherishing them, falling in love with them, attaching to them. Go ahead, Russ.
Do not remain in a dualistic state. Avoid such easy habits carefully. If you attach even to a trace of this and that, of right and wrong, the mind essence will be lost in confusion. Although all dualities arise from the one, do not be attached even to the ideas of this one.
And there, ending again with this nudge, this direct pointing to the cause and effect dangers of attachment. Even to the one, don't become attached. Even to ideas of this one, don't become attached. And finally, Russ, take us to the end of the first third of this poem that we'll do today.
When the mind exists undisturbed in the way, there is no objection to anything in the world. And when there is no objection to anything, things cease to be in the old way. When no discriminating attachment arises, the old mind ceases to exist. Let go of things as separate existences, and mind too vanishes. Likewise, when the thinking subject vanishes, so too do the objects created by the mind.
And that right there is Roshi's nothing above the saddle, nothing below the saddle, no saddle. When no discriminating attachment arises, when the things we perceive, when the things I perceive that are distinct, when I'm not caught by that and hold tightly to those distinctions as reality, things change, things cease to be. Things cease to be in the old way. Something new, big new, appears. Even the old mind ceases to exist. Letting go of things as separate existences, the mind too vanishes. Likewise, when the thinking subject vanishes, so too do the objects created by mind. When the rider of the horse rides being at one, it's as if rider disappears. When rider disappears, it's as if horse disappears and no saddle. We'll continue on with pieces of the Shinjin-mei through the week. But I today also wanted to comment on the title itself. This translation calls it Trust in Mind. Sometimes faith in mind. So trust or faith in mind. Or Heartmind. That's Shin. Sometimes Song of Mind. But there's one that I really appreciated that brings out a nuance that is missed by some, I think. There are two versions of this one. In the kanji, part of what's alluded to is the character that can mean inscription or inscribed. And so there's a version of this that's called inscription on trust in mind or heart. And another that brings this out even more fully, and for me has had great practice value. And that translation for the title is trust inscribed upon the mind, or trust inscribed upon the heart, trust inscribed upon the heart mind. We might think at first it might be useful that we have to conjure up trust, find a way to trust, manufacture some trust. And indeed, at times, this might be necessary and useful and helpful. But we might discover that kind of conjured up, manufactured sort of trusting is a bit like Dumbo's feather. In this case, I'm Dumbo. If you recall the story of Dumbo, who could fly, discovered he could fly. The only way he could discover this was by being told and believing that it was the magic feather that enabled him to fly. But it wasn't the feather. It wasn't a magic feather. That capacity and ability to fly was already within Dumbo. He could later discover that. But it was only able to be discovered after he was already doing it. I think that this poem points us toward a trust that's already present. A trust that's already embedded, inscribed, engraved within and upon our hearts, our minds, the heart mind. I think this poem is pointing at this trust being inscribed upon our hearts, because our hearts arise out of the great heart, our mind arising out of great mind. I think this poem points us toward the trust that is inscribed upon and within the very heart of the universe. In every moment, in every place, in every molecule, this trust and this functioning of trust. It's inscribed, engraved, but sometimes we have to blow off some dust. Sometimes we have to touch it because we can't quite see this trust. But maybe we can just touch it and make out by sensing through our fingers as we run our hands and fingers over the stone, the inscription there. Then we find not just the word trust engraved, but trust itself already there. I think this is what I'd like to explore in practice, in Zazen, in our ordinary life, living, working. I'd like to maybe explore this a little bit more in the coming talks as well. So I'll end with my new hobby, which is to play with and rework blessing poems by Jan Richardson. Because just today I found another that speaks to this trust being inscribed on our hearts and trust being inscribed in the heart of the universe. Her original poem was called Drawing Near. And for us now, in my reworking, made especially for us here right now today, it's called Blessing for the Discovery of Trust Inscribed upon the Heart. It is difficult to see it from here, I know, but trust me when I say this blessing is inscribed upon your horizonless heart. Is written on that far point you can hardly see, or is perhaps behind you, etched into a heartscape whose contours you cannot know from here. All you know is that it calls you, draws you, pulls you toward what you have perceived only in pieces, in fragments that came to you in sitting, in offering, in the ordinary grace of the everyday, or in dreaming. I cannot account for how, as you draw near, the blessing of trust embedded in the heart begins to blossom. So come, rest your heart upon great heart, and let the flower of this heart trust bloom.